Hi guys, we're continuing with the U.S. history, U.S. and world history in the last 500 years in a nutshell. So, say hi, Ruben.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, so continue. We were continuing. This is the second part of this. Um, so we were talking about how in the 1800s, we had North and South, and they were each specialized in different things. The Southern economy was based on slavery, labor, um, agriculture. The crops were primarily cotton farms. They were dependent greatly on slaves for work. The Northern economy, however, was mostly based on industry, commerce, paid labor, and agriculture to a lesser degree. And by the 1800s, slavery was completely or mostly abolished in the North. And then, what was that point? Read it.
The North and South worked to maintain balance of power when new states were added. They were done so in pairs, one slavery and one free. In mid 1800s, vast western territories were to decide themselves whether to allow slavery or not. War in Kansas at 1855 reflected this struggle, and to the later war between North and South in late 1850s, Abraham Lincoln promised to halve the spread of slavery, but not to abolish it where it already existed. Some slave states seceded from U.S. and set up their own government called the Confederacy.
In 1861, the Civil War was caused by the conflict of whether slavery should be allowed. This war between the this was between the Union, which was the North, and the Confederacy, which was the South, and was fought mostly in the South. By 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to the Union General Ulysses S. Grant. This ended slavery, and during Reconstruction in the next 12 years, the South was rebuilt, overseen by the federal troops.
Schools were established for former slaves who were now all freed. For example, in 1868 in South Carolina, as well as other southern states, both whites and African Americans served for political posts due to power gained during the Reconstruction.
In 1870s, Reconstruction ended, and mostly the whites were um, back in power to a certain degree, somewhat preventing voting of African Americans still, and also sharecropping continued, and it was mostly black farmers still, or African Americans.
In the mid 1800s, urbanization occurred where immigrants came from many places to work. Large cities grew, especially New York, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. Large groups of people in these urban centers worked in factories. Immigrants moved here in greater numbers, especially in the late 1800s, drawn by factory jobs and else more.
Etc. The majority were from Europe, including Germany, Italy, Russia, Eastern Europe, as well as from Mexico, Central America, and, well, Chinese immigrants, which had been coming previously, were started to be banned by the government, so they couldn't come anymore, and their immigration was declined. However, Japanese still were able to come to do mining and farm work mostly. Let's see. So this is talking about immigrants and how many were actually obtaining legality between 1890 and 1899. about 3.69 million um, people were obtaining legality, which is like citizenship and that were immigrants. And out of this, Europeans were 97%, Asia from Asia 2%, and Americas 1%. And then this was 1890 to 1899, and then from 2000, about 100 years later, to 2009, the immigrants getting legality is about 10.3 million. Of this, Europeans 13%, Asia 34, Americas 43, Africa 7, Oceania 1, and not specified 2%.
So Europeans in the 1890s were the majority of people gaining permanent residency. However, in 2000, the majority were coming from Asia and the Americas. Based on percentages of population, Europeans gaining legal status was 3x more in the 1890s at 3 million, then in the 2000s at 1 million of population people.
So, expanding industries started growing extremely fast during a period called industrialization. Um, and since the mid 1800s, um, industries were growing, however, they were growing steadily. But all of a sudden, they saw rapid growth, mostly due to gained natural resources from Western territories. Okay.
Vast areas of the U.S. provided materials and resources which supported industrialization, such as metals used to manufacture products and machines. For example, the Bessemer process used to produce steel more easily. Fuels such as a coal used to power machines was also found. So new machines and industrial processes were invented. Manufacturing of goods became easier and more efficient, and new factories were built from the mid to late 1800s for different kinds of production.
In the progressive era, the problems brought by the fast industrialization era in regards to labor were given attention by reformers and unions. This is because factory work could be grueling and dangerous, and with long hours and low pay. Unions were created for workers who pledged to work together for better and safer working conditions and higher wages. Sometimes strikes were held to ensure fairness when employers cut wages or refused to grant raises. The example is the 8-hour workday and the 5-day week, as well as better working conditions, which were established by unions in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Therefore, reformers and groups worked to gain more freedoms and to solve different problems brought on by rapid industrialization.
Some projects included extra cleanup and improving healthcare and slums, limiting child labor, presenting uh, nature, creating parks. Also, people fought for a voice in government and in bringing on various social political improvements. Women lobbying for voting rights.
Lobbying. So, those are all the different um, issues of importance, right? Cleanup, healthcare, slums, child labor, nature,
Good dads for children.
and voting rights and social and political improvements. After industrialization, the US tried to gain access to more materials and markets from other countries. They started pursuing a thing called imperialistic policies, and this was following the 1800s. They wanted additional resources from Africa, Asia, Latin America, especially for rich natural resources, and they started becoming a little more imperialistic, like some of the European nations had been before. Um, Imperialism sought to extend out political reach onto other nations